Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Ms. Campbell, would you call the roll for us?
Mr. Hannigan.
Here.
Mr. Derman.
Here.
Mr. Loop.
Here.
Mr. Harrell.
Here.
Mr. Nation.
Here.
Mr. Jeter.
Here.
Mrs. Seeley.
Present.
Mrs. Drucker.
Here.
Mr. Betancourt. Mr. Womack. Mr. Hersey. Mrs. Mullet. Mr. Kuzan. Mrs. Belisario. Mrs. Hines.
Here. Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell. I'd like to welcome you to our July 6, 2017 meeting. This evening, we'll have the invocation and the pledge by Mr. Womack, and if you'd please stand and let him lead that for us.
Let's bow our heads. Lord God, we come before you, and we know that your word says that there's a special place in your heart for the little children. It says, suffer not the little children to come unto me. You also make a promise in your word of wisdom. Most of us, when we pray for these meetings, we ask you for wisdom. Your word says to ask for wisdom, and you give it liberally, and you don't hold back on it. So give us that wisdom, Lord, and let us do what we need to do to see that our children get a world-class education. We commit it to you in your precious name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Womack. I appreciate that prayer. Our first item this evening is approval of the, well, we didn't have anyone sign up on the agenda to speak, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the committee as a whole meeting held on June 1st, 2017. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes? Motion by Mr. Womack, a second by Mr. Loop. Do we have any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? So ordered. All right, that brings us to our next item, which is human resources and revised superintendent evaluation instrument. You may remember that Ms. Mullet appointed a work group to look at revising the superintendent evaluation instrument. So the work group met a number of times. We met in March and April. We surveyed board members between those meetings, and we had a final draft presented on June 8th. The current instrument that we've been using is something that, as far as my research, is that we've been using it since 1996. And it's been talked about over the years that we make some changes to that instrument. In surveying the board members regarding the old instrument, the comments that came from about the old instrument were mostly positive. They stated that a few items by the board members felt like they couldn't evaluate, and board members also said they'd like a more professional look was needed. We also decided in our work group meeting that it didn't have any comments regarding school safety or technology, and we felt like that was some important components to put in. So the form has been revamped and formatted. We used the superintendent's current job description as our topic headings. We looked at other evaluation instruments and did some reading about the evaluation process. And those instruments were from the Georgia School Board Association, Fairfax County, Virginia, Texas, and then our current instrument. Then we attended some sessions at the National School Board Association meeting and listened to comments on superintendent evaluation instruments at those meetings and kind of came back with some ideas from that. And we also looked at the scoring method. So what you have before you tonight is what we came up with, and we'd like to know if there's any questions. Ms. Mullet?
Well, I would just like to make a motion that we accept this, so then we have to discuss. We'll be able to do that along with that motion, I just want to thank that work group because I think it looks great. I think the things that we needed to update and tweak, you guys and ladies have done a great job. So I appreciate you taking the time to work on this for the last 2 months. I appreciate that.
All right, so we
And
have
I'd
a-
like to make that motion.
We have a motion by Ms. Mullet. We have a second from Ms. Seeley. So discussion from board members. Mr. Hennigan?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Heinz, and thanks to the committee for putting this together. I agree. It is good. Just a minor comment. I wondered if we could move this safety bullet under student services to management, in that it's the students and the employees, right? It's not just the students. It's our staff.
Where was that, Mr.
It's under, last bullet under student
Student
Services.
Services?
And just move that under management, because to me, it's more global.
You're saying move number 4?
Yeah, the safety bullet
Under-
doesn't just apply to students.
To management?
Yeah. If you would, that's minor, just putting it in a different place. Thank you.
Right. Ms. Belisario, did you have a question?
I did. Ms. Mullen, I didn't quite catch what you said. Are you moving to accept one of these? There are 2 in my packet, and since we just got them, I haven't read them. I don't know what they are.
Well,
There's
can
the-
I address that, Ms.
Yeah,
Belisario?
sure.
There are 2, because one of them is for the president to use in the combined scores and comments copy. And also, just for informational purposes, it was included in your email.
Okay. I'd kind of like to read it, though, before we accept it, so I don't mind if we vote tonight, but I'll probably abstain only because I haven't read them. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Trinigan?
Just to be clear, was that accepted as a friendly amendment to move that one bullet point to the person who made the motion?
I don't have any problem with saying that we would move it to that. I mean, do y'all?
Yeah, and since I made the motion, that's fine. Friendly amendment.
So it's part of the amendment, it's part of the motion. Good.
Any other comments? All right, do we want to vote on the motion? All those in favor of accepting the superintendent evaluation instrument? Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, Mr. Dermond. Do we have any public comment? All right, all those in favor of accepting the superintendent evaluation instrument, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Abstention from Ms. Belisario. So ordered. All right, and I would like to say thank you to Mr. Kuzan and Ms. Drucker, Mr. Jabbia, and then Ms. Mullet and Mr. Foles were copied on all of our emails, so thank you all for helping with that. All right, that brings us to instruction, the pupil progression plan update. Ms. Strataberger.
Good evening, Ms. Heinz, Mr. Foss, board members, and guests. Tonight, I will review the 2017-2018 Pupil Progression Advisory Process, as well as address the recommendations for revision put forth by the Pupil Progression Advisory Committee. The Pupil Progression Advisory Process began by receiving electronic input from all of our schools. The input was then shared and discussed with principals during the April principal meeting. The first advisory committee meeting was held in mid-April, in which proposed considerations offered by principals, public emails, and committee members were discussed. These points of consideration were then reviewed at the public input meeting held at Lakeshore High in early May. The advisory committee held a meeting on May 12th to further discuss all proposed considerations and make final recommendations. Tonight, we will present the final proposed recommendations for your consideration. The advisory committee's function is to review and make recommendations for revision, if necessary, after a careful review of all stakeholder input. The advisory committee consists of administrators, parents, and teachers representing elementary, middle, junior, and high schools across the district. St. Tammany Parish Public Schools is committed to our community through its mission statement to engage all students in a high-quality education, resulting in lifelong learners who can contribute to the society in which they live. As part of this commitment, the district's pupil progression plan serves as the district's governing policy to be reviewed and revised annually. After a diligent review of all proposed stakeholder considerations that included research, data analysis, and discussion, the Advisory Committee recommends the following revisions to the 2017-2018 Pupil Progression Plan. First, to update the designated course list to reflect updated course titles. We would like to add psychology dual enrollment to the designated course list. As per current policy, ranking class is determined based upon a maximum of 16 weighted courses from the designated course list earned in grades 9 through 12. The designated course list is a list of 35 math, English, science, and social studies courses that qualify for local weighted credit and ranking class determination. Given recent changes in Louisiana Department of Education and College Board course titles, the Advisory Committee is recommending that we update the names of the courses to properly and accurately reflect courses noted on the designated course list. The Advisory Committee's recommendation to update course titles on the designated course list is merely a semantic change and will have no substantive effect on the ranking class process. The second Advisory Committee recommendation seeks to bring clarity to the ranking class process as described in our pupil progression plan. This revision of current language is to bring greater written clarity only and does not make any substantive change to the ranking class process and determination. The recommendation is as follows. Ranking class will be based upon quality points a student completes in grades 9 through 12. Although a full-time high school student may complete more than 28 credits, only 28 credits will be applied toward a student's rank in class. Rank in class is determined based upon a student's best 28 credits completed in grades 9 through 12 and a student's best 16 weighted courses from the designated course list completed in grades 9 through 12. Consequently, the student who earns the most quality points will be ranked number 1 in the graduating class. As some of you may recall, the ranking class process was developed a few years ago after much debate, research, and collaboration by many individuals, including some current board members. Feedback from high school administrators, advisory committee members, and parents noted that the current ranking class process that many of you helped design is currently working as intended to create an equitable process whereby all students can complete fairly for ranking class. Additionally, the advisory committee noted that ranking class is a function of graduation and as such should reflect a student's high school experience. Once again, the advisory committee's recommendation to clarify this language is merely a semantic change and will have no substantive effect on the ranking class process and determination. The St. Tammany Parish Public School System provides a caring environment for learning, a challenging and relevant curriculum, innovative instruction, and solid student achievement. The Advisory Committee believes that proposed revisions to the 2017-2018 Pupil Progression Plan will further these goals. To continue our commitment to student achievement and high performance, we submit these revisions to the 2017-2018 Pupil Progression Plan for your consideration. Thank you for your time and attention.
Ms. Stratterberger, just a point of clarification. When you talked about the updated designated course list, you said psychology, but did you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry, sociology. I
Okay.
misspoke. I apologize. Sociology. I'm sorry.
Just wanted to make.
I taught psychology, so that's kind of.
All right. Do we have any questions about the pupil progression plan update? Yes, we do. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Derman, second by Ms. Drucker. Any questions? Mr. Bettencourt.
Thank you. I did want to ask that before you clarified it, but what is the DE after sociology?
It stands for dual enrollment.
Okay.
It would be a college dual enroll course.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions? All right, if there are no other questions from the board, do we have comments from the public? All right, then let's vote on the motion. We have a motion to update the pupil progression plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? So ordered.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Ms. Strataberger. We appreciate that. And that's all we have this evening for the Human Resources and Education Committee. Ms. Mullet, do you have something you need to add?
I apologize. I just wanted to clarify, when Ms. Bellisario said, the evaluation was sent to us in our packets online.
I get my packets, I occasionally read online, but I get my packet in the mail, and there was nothing in that.
Okay, because it was online on the 29th. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no further business, then I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this July 6th Committee as a Whole meeting for Business Affairs and Administrative. Mrs. Campbell, will you call the roll?
Mr. Nation.
Here.
Mr. Hannigan. Mrs. Heinz. Mr. Derman. Mr. Loop. Mr. Harrell. Mr. Jeter. Mrs. Seeley.
Present.
Mrs. Drucker.
Here.
Mr. Betancourt. Mr. Womack. Mr. Hersey. Mrs. Mullet. Mr. Kuzan. Mrs. Bellisario.
Okay, thank you. Since the invocation and pledge were said at our previous meeting, they will be dispensed with at this meeting. We did have one person sign up to speak tonight, Ms. Cindy Rester, for 3 minutes. Ms. Rester, welcome.
I have a couple of questions that actually have nothing to do with your agenda tonight, but I also brought something I'd like to give each of you a copy that's related to my question, if that's okay?
All right.
Since last year's budget meeting, I spent quite a bit of time doing some research and looking over school board budgets and such, and I had a few questions that I was hoping that the board could address. We all know that growth has occurred in St. Tammany Parish, which means growth in the school district. So my question is related to MFP versus instructional budget. You'll see from the chart that I gave you, I compared several years, starting with the 12-13 year, all the way through the 16-17 year. And I was really confused because starting with the first comparison of 12-13 and 13-14, that MFP increased by $5 million, but yet the instructional budget only increased by $363,000. Between 13 and 14 and 14-15, there was an increase of 1.9 million, but the instructional budget only increased 5,000. Then between 14-15 and 15-16, there was an increase of $2.3 million. Then the instructional budget decreased by 470,000. Between 15-16 and 16-17, MFP funding increased by 2.5 million, and the instructional budget decreased by 119,000. So the chart that I gave you is the differences in that, and I'm wondering if anyone can explain to me how that happens, that the MFP increases so much, but instructional budgets are decreasing the last several years.
Okay, Mrs. Rester, have you spoken to anybody in the administration? Have you
Excuse me?
spoken to Mr. Foltz or anybody in his administration about these concerns?
Regarding this right here, no,
Okay, and why is that?
because I thought I would address it with the school board.
Well,
It's
okay.
a school board issue, isn't it?
Well, it is, but he is our superintendent and is handled
Right,
by.
and I've been in communication with Mr. Foltz about
Good.
many things.
All right. But
Correct?
we have a top-notch business person, so I bet she can answer these questions off the top of her head. Go ahead, Terry.
I guess I have a question for her.
Okay.
She didn't give me the total, where these changes you're showing, these are differences. What is the total that you're pulling this from? Because instructional, are you just looking at total instruction regular line?
Looking at the actual budget, the finalized budgets for each year.
Okay,
And
which-
looking at the
which-
line item of the MFP,
Right, I
okay?
understand that.
And then the line item on instructional budgets.
Which line in the budget for instructional? There's a lot of instructional lines.
You want the number. I'll have to provide that to you at a different date then.
Ms. Rester, would you
because I
be
didn't bring
okay with
that.
me setting up a meeting with me and you and Terry? And
Sure.
you come up and we'll lay all this out and we'll pull them all together and everything?
Sure.
All right.
Just if you'll grant me just a
Sure.
second word, because my main question with all of this is I'm curious as to how.
Just a second more, because your 3 minutes are up.
I understand.
Right.
My main question is how you decide on the instructional budget being divided amongst the schools.
Right, we can share that with you.
All right.
You have that?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be
Okay.
glad. And I'll email you, or you can email me, and we'll set up a date, time for you to come up.
Okay.
And I'll probably include Dr. Sanford as well, because instructional budget is under, that's where we get it from.
Sure.
Good deal.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rester. All right. Moving on to approval of the minutes for the committee as a whole meeting held June 1st, 2017. Do I have a motion to approve? I move. All right. Is there, Ms. Seeley moves. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, Mr. Jeter seconds. Any questions or comments about the minutes? All right, anything from the public? All right, not hearing anything. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. All right, any abstentions? All right, motion carries. All right, Mr. Jabbia, item 5.
Thank you, Mr. Nation, members of the board. Item 5 is recommends acceptance of the changes to the district handbook for students and parents for the 17-18 school year. We've been notified by the Office of Civil Rights that we need to make some changes to our handbook in the compliance notice and also with relative to a grievance procedure for parents, students, and employees. You may recall, I'll have to ask Ms. Strataberger, how long ago it was, probably last year or 18 months ago, we came to you with, from the Civil Rights Survey, and a civil rights audit will be done on this school system at some time in the future, and one of their recommendations was to adopt a grievance procedure. This particular grievance procedure that I'm presenting to you tonight will serve twofold. It will serve for our handbook and it'll also serve for our civil rights audit when they come to do that. So what we did is, and I included in your packet the appropriate pages, which are pages 10, 29, 30, and 31, and I'll refer to those. On page 10, we removed section 504, the compliance notice, because the new non-discrimination notice encompasses it. We changed the title of the career and technical education compliance notice, because all it said was compliance notice. So now we would have 2 paragraphs, and both of them would say compliance notice. So to distinguish, we changed one to the career and technical, because we had to have that notice for that particular item. We added the new, we also, under the educational compliance notice to Mike Kosei on pages 29 and 30. So Mike is going to be the contact person for Title IX and Title II. And that's if any complaints will come directly to him. And then we added the new non-discrimination notice and grievance procedure starting on page 30. This notice has been reviewed and approved by both our special education and our general counsel, and also by the U.S. Department of Education. So we're asking for your recommendation and acceptance of these changes to our student handbook tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbia. Is there a motion to accept it? All right, Mr. Womack moves, and Mr. Jeter seconds. The floor is now open for discussion, and we'll use the queue system if anybody would like to speak. So, any questions for Mr. Jabbia? Okay. Any question? All right, Mr. Derman.
Mr. Jabby, just by a general overview, how much change is this making to our procedure?
Our grievance procedure?
Yes, sir.
I think if I can think of the right word, it's more concise, and it's not as complicated as our old procedure. It was a lot of different timelines, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, so many days. This is pretty concise. One person goes to it, makes the decision, give a timeline, the superintendent, they can appeal to the superintendent.
Right. Because I was looking at the, no later than 30 days after the filings. And
Right.
so
So it's
it
gonna make it all a little bit more
compress
compact.
it more.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was looking at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Anyone else from the board? All right. Any comments from the public regarding the changes to our student handbook? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. All right,
Thank you.
moving on to item 6. Mr. Jabbia.
Yes, consideration of reopener agreement by St. Tammany Parish School Board and St. Tammany Federation of Teaching and School Employees. Board members, we came to you last month with the reopener dealing with salary. The item that I'm bringing before you tonight was an item that we discussed during our collective bargaining sessions that we had. But I asked the Federation to please, let's concentrate on the salary schedules, get those to you so that we could get those adopted and get those into our system. And then I told them that I would be bringing this to you at a later date. So this was discussed at our session. It was at my request, and the Federation agreed that we would wait until a later time. And this is that later time, and the only thing that we have, and you'll also notice in that paragraph on that reopener, there will be no other reopeners besides this one. And this is to take junior high school athletic directors who currently get a 3% supplement, and they do quite a bit of work on the junior high level, a number of sports, and coordinate all of that, to change their percentage from 3% to 5% with a fiscal impact of approximately $15,000 total. And we're asking for your approval for that, and that is the last reopener for the collective bargaining agreement.
All right, is there a motion to approve this agreement? Mrs. Hines, and Mrs. Drucker seconds. Floor is now open for discussion. And we'll again use the queue system, so if you want to queue up. All right. Mr. Kuzan.
13.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Not seeing anything. Any comments or questions from the public regarding the reopener agreement? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Mr. Nation, if I could, I'd like
Sure.
to thank the Federation for their cooperation and working together. Ms. Craddock is here tonight. Ms. Green is out of town, but she's on board and fully aware of all of this going on tonight.
Very good. And thank you to you and your team for the hard work y'all have done on this, this agreement.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, moving on to item 7.
Item 7 is consider and take action with respect to adopting a resolution regarding uninsured motorist coverage. We've never come to you before, we've never had to come to you before, but the agent that has our liability is asking that the board adopt a resolution where we waive uninsured motorist coverage. We've never had it. We don't recommend that we do have it. It's not needed for us. We're self-insured. Mr. Derman is very knowledgeable with insurance. I'm sure he can give you a little bit more detail than I can, but it would be actually a costly move for us to do this, whereas we do not need it, and we just need to adopt the resolution to satisfy the requirements of the insurance agency.
Okay. All right, Mr. Derman moves, second by Mr. Loop. Again, we'll use our queue up system, so give Mrs. Campbell just a second. All right, and so, Mr. Derman.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. As what Mr. Jabby was speaking of earlier, is that the uninsured motorist portion of our automobile insurance would be almost like a duplication of coverage for our employees because all of our employees are currently covered under a workers' comp. So it would just be another avenue if in fact there was litigation, and you can ask Mr. Pittman that question, but it would be, here again, we're also self-insured with a high SIR retention. It's just more cost to the board. So for legal purposes as well as just simple coverage, we've never had it. We're not losing anything because it's just a matter of paperwork that's required by a lot of carriers that you acknowledge you either take it or you reject it. And that's what we're simply doing, is rejecting uninsured motorists. So it's not like we're taking away a coverage that we had. We
It's
just
the same-
never had it.
Yeah,
It's
same
just cleaning
coverage
up.
as we had in the past.
Just cleaning up the paperwork.
All right, thank you, Mr. Derman. All right, I see your fingers on. Okay, very good. Anyone else? All right, any comments or questions from the public regarding this resolution? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, moving on now to item 8. Mr.
Thank
Jabian.
you. Thank you, Mr. Nation. Included in your packet is the annual uniform evaluation report. It's something we do for you each year. Dr. Tillman is here if you have any questions. Monthly maintenance and custodial report was sent to you electronically. Maintenance staff is here. Mr. Williams, Mr. Gottschall, if you have any questions. And Mr. Singletary, sorry.
Any questions? All right, moving on.
The risk management report is in your packet also. Mr. Gaspard is here if you have any questions.
Anything from Mr. Gaspard? Okay,
And the monthly transportation report is in your packet. Ms. Buell is here if you have any questions.
very good. Thank you, Mr. Jabbia.
Thank you.
All right, moving on now to Ms. Tipton and our construction report.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. I have quite a few recommendations for substantial completion that I'll go through here. These are projects that we anticipated would complete closer to these July meetings. We'll have another group of them for the August meetings. So the first item is recommends acceptance of Carolyn Park Middle School renovations as substantially complete, subject to the architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz, STPSB project number 1452.
All right, motion by Mr. Womack, a second. Second by Mrs. Mullet. All right, any questions for Ms. Tipton on this recommendation? Okay, any questions or comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, item 2.
Recommends acceptance of Clearwood Junior High School renovations and additions as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz, STPSB project number 1415.
Mrs. Mullet moves, Mrs. Belisario seconds. Motion's on the floor for discussion. Any questions regarding this recommendation? Any questions or comments from the public? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 3.
Recommends acceptance of North Shore High School interior renovations as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz, STPSB project number 1436.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Belisario, second by Mr. Kuzan. Any questions or comments regarding this recommendation? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 4.
Recommends acceptance of North Shore High School abatement as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foltz, STPSB project number 1438.
Okay. All right, motion by Mr. Kuzan, second by Mrs. Belisario. Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 5.
Recommends acceptance of Lyon Elementary School gymnasium and 200-wing roof coating as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPSB project number R0010.
Motion by Mr. Derman, second by Mr. Loop. Any questions or comments regarding recommendation 5? Any questions or comments from the public? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Motion carries. Item 6.
Recommends acceptance of Mandeville High School practice field and parking lot as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPSB project number P0138.
All right, motion by Mr. Hennigan, second by Mrs. Drucker. Any questions or comments on recommendation 6? All right, anything from the public? Not seeing anything there. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, number 7.
Recommends acceptance of William Pitcher Junior High School choral building roof replacement and exterior painting as substantially complete, subject to architect's recommendations, submission of all regulatory requirements, and approval of Superintendent Foles, STPSB project number R0016.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Heinz, second by Mr. Derman. Any questions or comments regarding this recommendation? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstention? Motion carries. All right, our monthly construction report.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kuzan, I missed you. You got to holler.
Could you give me an update on the Alton Elementary project?
Yes, sir. They, I'm going to mention that in my report, but they have gotten on site and started the clearing, and they have their permit in place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kuzan. So you can strike Alton off the report now. We've already covered that.
Yes, sir.
I didn't see it on the report. Is it?
Oh, I'm fixing to read a report.
He's just giving it to you now. All right.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Good.
That's right. Man ahead of his time. All right, go ahead.
The June weather has been challenging for our construction projects. However, contractors have been moving forward as they can. Roofing work and exterior waterproofing projects at Lyon Elementary, Boyette Junior, Bayou Woods Elementary, and Pitcher Junior High are progressing, and some are very near completion. The site for the Alton parking lot has been partially cleared. The modulars for Mandeville High have been moved to the school and are being set. Limestone is being brought in to Mandeville High for the new parking lot, and the irrigation is in place for the new practice field location, and sod will be installed as soon as weather allows. Repairs are progressing at Florida Avenue Elementary Gym. The new modular buildings are set on site at Madisonville Elementary, and the contractor has started running electrical conduit and laying out the walkways. At Lancaster Elementary School, floor tile is installed, sidewalks are being formed and poured, and the contractor is working towards scheduling inspections. The slab has been poured back in the boys' locker room and lobby restrooms, and the foundation for structural column has been excavated and formed in the east entry area at the Sawdell High renovation project. There are many trades on site throughout the work areas at Pearl River High School, including masonry, concrete site work, painting, electrical, HVAC, and plumbing. Summer phased renovations to the cafeteria seating area and band room are progressing well. At Mayfield Elementary, glass installation is near completion. Sheetrock is being tape floated and primed. Restroom wall tile has been installed, and electrical and HVAC work continue to progress. Foundations for the new canopy have been poured, and the surrounding sidewalk is scheduled to be poured tomorrow morning. Work with many trades continues to progress at Fontainebleau Junior High, including painting, ceiling grid installation, electrical and mechanical work. At Abney Elementary Library renovation, exterior brickwork is complete, and at the interior, sheetrock installation is being completed, and electrical and HVAC work are progressing. Work is progressing in the main hall of the school, and windows are being installed in the 200 wing at Mandeville Junior High. At Clearwood Junior High, the portable classroom buildings are being removed and punch list items are being completed. The contractor is working on final items for completion in the cafeteria seating area for Carolyn Park Middle School. Renovation work in the computer labs and the cafeteria seating area at North Shore High School is complete, and the contractor is completing punch list items. Excavation and structural fill installation is progressing for pupil appraisal building project, and the architect and engineers are working on documents for the Lancaster Elementary first floor build-out project. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Ms. Tipton on the monthly construction report? Mr. Kuzan, you got it? Sounds like it's been a busy summer, Ms. Tipton.
Yes, sir.
All right, all right. Mrs. Seeley.
Of course, I'm going to ask the question, does it look like we're on schedule with our, what is it, fall date?
It's a late fall or early part of second semester currently as it's scheduled. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you
For
very
Pearl
much.
River High.
For Pearl
Yes,
River, I
I'm
was going to say
sorry.
just for the,
No.
for the public.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Seeley. Any other questions for Ms. Tipton? Is it, okay. Mrs. Drucker.
The second floor of Lancaster Elementary.
Oh, microphone, Mrs. Drucker. There we go. Thank you.
Second floor of Lancaster, will we be open for the fall?
We certainly are working very diligently in that direction, and it's looking good for that right now.
So more than likely?
It's looking good for right now.
It's
Thank
looking
you.
good right now.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Drucker. Anyone else? All right. Thank you as always, Ms. Tipton.
Thank you.
All right. Now we go back to Ms. Prevost. Ms. Prevost, our business affairs report. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Nations. Item A, to consider and take action with respect to adopting a resolution providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation school refunding bonds, Series 2017, of St. Tammany Parish-wide School District Number 12 of the Parish of St. Tammany, State of Louisiana, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
All right. The resolution's on the table. Is there a motion? Mr. Dermott and Mr. Dermott and Ms. Seeley seconds. And I believe we have Mr. Schluter here tonight, our bond attorney. So, Ms. Prevost, anything else you want to add before we, Mr. Schluter?
Well,
good to see you as always.
This is certainly a good news item. The savings on this latest refinancing greatly exceeded what was projected when you gave your initial approval. Stephanie Ferry is here again with Raymond James, the underwriter who priced this issue. Just as a reminder how these particular refundings work, when you refund general obligation bonds, you do not extend the maturities. You simply reduce the payments each year. So it's kind of like refinancing a house or a vehicle, and you simply reduce your periodic payments. So we have savings each year with no debt extension. This is the refinancing of the Series 2010 bonds. The net savings after all costs, and of course, all the savings to this type of refinancing go to the taxpayers. It simply reduces taxpayer bills. $951,000 and change. So that is significantly higher than what was brought to you originally. The underwriter did a very good job pricing this issue, hit the market right, and substantial savings. The outstanding bonds, Series 2010, had rates of up to 4.5%. The true interest cost on the refunding bonds are 2.37%, so a dramatic reduction in the interest rate. The savings level is well over 2 times the State Bond Commission recommended guidelines for economic refundings by political subdivisions. The recommendation is 3% on a present value basis, and yours was at 6.45%, so one of the healthier refinancings. Standard & Poor's reaffirmed your AA bond rating, stable, which helps you a great deal in attaining these interest rates and these savings. This is your 9th completed refunding since 2004, and the aggregate of savings to taxpayers over the life of each of the issues that were, remaining life of each of the issues that were refunded now tops $11 million. So over time, that's $11 million that the property taxpayers do not pay. And of course, that's contributed to your periodic reduction of your millage to service your outstanding bonds. Your latest reduction, of course, was this year. You reduced your bond millage by 1 mil. Projections are that you'll be able to reduce that even further on next year's tax roll, on 2018 tax roll. So a very healthy refinancing, and we're very pleased with it. You have one more after this, and that's the one that you last approved. It is going to the State Bond Commission. Assuming the market holds, that'll be priced in early August. And that's the last one that's on the table right now. But again, you're over 11 million with this latest 9th refinancing.
All right. Mr. Schluter, I'll start with the questions and then open it up to anyone else. So we've saved taxpayers, you said, over $11 million for these refunding series. Say again, how is it that we're able to save taxpayers and roll back their taxes because of, how are we able to do that?
Well, one of the primary reasons is your AA bond rating. That's as high a bond rating as any school board in Louisiana has obtained. It's very, very strong, and it lets you sell these bonds, not only the refinancing bonds, but also your new money bonds for new construction at the very lowest interest rate on any particular date.
And so how do you get a AA credit rating?
It's a number of factors. Standard & Poor's considers the general economy, operations of the school board. They look at fund balance. That's very, very important. To have a AA rating, you have to maintain a certain fund balance, emergency reserves, very, very important. But Standard & Poor's has consistently rated you AA. There's only a handful of other school systems, very, very few, that have that AA rating, and that translates, again, on any particular day these bonds are sold to the lowest possible interest rate.
So to put it in other terms, because of the how well the finances are managed by Mr. Foltz and his team, we've been able to reduce the burden on taxpayers.
Absolutely.
In this case, by $11 million, plus rollback millages, which we did this year.
And the Standard & Poor's analysts know the superintendent and Ms. Prevost very well.
Right. So, well, all of us on this board, I know I speak for myself, we consider this a business, what we do. There is a business side, obviously, and I think any corporation would be jealous to have the credit rating we do. Now, let me ask you this. Obviously, are there higher ratings than AA?
No school board in Louisiana has a higher rating than AA. The next rating on the S&P scale is AA plus.
Right.
And then the top rating is AAA.
And
so there are two ratings that are higher that are possible. No school board in Louisiana has attained either one of those ratings to date. We've been told by the S&P analyst, and Stephanie Ferry has also, it's been told to her also, that we are in a great position to have an increased bond rating, but for retirement and OPEB. Retirement is largely beyond your control, but it's something that Standard & Poor's and the other rating agencies are very aware of, and it's something that is keeping a number of school systems in Louisiana from getting upgrades.
So what you just said, when you said we, you meant this school system and this school board could very easily rise beyond the AA except for the state legislature.
That is what's holding us back right now, is the retirement and the portion that is funded out of your general revenues.
And Ms. Prevost, our obligation to the state for retirement is what percentage, is it 18%, something?
I believe it's.
Percentage-wise, not number-wise.
It's around 26.
Oh, okay, 26%.
For teachers, and the school employees is like 30%
But that wouldn't.
and some change,
But that's, would not.
for every dollar of payroll.
But that's not the normal rate, is that correct? I mean, if we didn't have these unfunded liabilities, what would our normal rate be?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Thought it was a little bit lower, but I mean, so in other words, but the state
That's what
bottom
we're
line.
paying.
Yeah,
That's the rate we're paying.
That's what I mean, we're paying
Right.
26%.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it would.
On every dollar.
On every dollar, so, because of, all right, very good. All right, it's very, you come every time Mr. Schluter's here, and I told him beforehand, I said, we're gonna call on you tonight just so we can hear your voice and see your lovely face, and thank you for what you do. Now, tell us, and primarily, and I mean, for all of us up here, but also the public, what does Raymond James do with Mr. Schluter for these bonds?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Nation. I'm happy to be here again. Stephanie Ferry with Raymond James. We act as the underwriter of these bonds, and what that means is we work with your bond counsel and with the administration to put together that package that is marketed to investors and then sold to them. So I coordinate with our underwriting desk, who helps us determine what interest rates need to go on those bonds and who should be the buyers. I mean, who is it that we're going to market these bonds to? And so leading up to the day that we actually price the bonds, we're getting feedback from our underwriting desk about what the market looks like, what are other competing issues out there that we may want to try to avoid, and any disruptions that may be there as we get to the date of sale. And based on coordination with them and our sales force, we use what's called a preliminary official statement that we get in conjunction with bond counsel and administration, and we use that to market the bonds to investors. Your bonds, particularly with this high rating, are going to be marketed to retail investors who typically like high-quality bonds. They're relatively short in nature. These only go out about 13 years, the bonds that we will be refunding.
Right.
So it'll be retail investors, insurance companies, to some extent, larger national institutional investors, and then local institutions will be purchasers of these bonds. And so we'll get the feedback from investors as we get to that day of pricing and market the bonds. And once we get those orders in, we report back to the school board what the results of those orders were and the level at which we expect to underwrite the bonds. And if there are any unsold bonds, if we need to adjust pricing. And given the approval that we receive from you, we then do the underwriting of the transaction, and in approximately 30 days from then, close it and fund it.
Very good. And these bonds are tax exempt, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it provides.
Both state and federal.
So it's a tax shield for these
Yes.
investors. All right, very good. I think that's it for me right now. We'll go to Mr. Hennigan as first in the queue.
Thank you, Mike. I guess Stephanie or Grant, this is somewhat related to the market conditions now, but can you tell me what's happening to the school districts in Illinois? Are they being killed over what's happening? Or?
It basically relates back to what Grant had alluded to with OPEB and pension funding. And that has a lot to do with the financial crisis and continued meltdown from there. When a lot of local governments got into trouble and finances got really tight, there are a number of them that got to the point of bankruptcy and did declare bankruptcy. And in those bankruptcy proceedings, the courts chose the pensions over investors. And so that caused investors to really start to focus a whole lot more than they ever have up to this point in what is that level of unfunded pension liabilities? What's that level of OPEB? Because now we really need to pay attention to it. If the courts are going to choose them over us in getting repaid, we want to know what our risk is. And so that's.
Would a
it in a
rating
nutshell.
of equivalent school district in Illinois be several steps lower than?
Oh, my goodness, they're at junk status at this point.
The school boards, the local school boards are?
Yes.
Oh,
junk
brother,
status.
wow. Wow. Okay, so if Louisiana goes the same route, we'll be in the similar trouble.
Yeah,
huh?
we're nowhere close to what Chicago is,
Yeah.
but yes, they do need to come up with some
Wow.
solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hennigan. Mr. Derman.
Thank you, Mr. Nation. I'm going to ask Mr. Schluter to get his crystal ball out here a little bit, being he's talking money and futures. With the interest rates that we're currently getting on our bonds, and because I know at one time they were substantially higher, and because the state gives us no money to fund our construction projects, which is all from local funding, it's a big benefit to us to actually have bonds issued with these lower rates and continue out. Is that not the process normally what we do?
Absolutely. And, you know, I go back to 80s with the school board, and of course, Bill Beck before me worked with you guys. And this school board has been very, very successful in going to the voters every 4 or 5 years for additional general obligation bonds, asking them to consider it for school construction so you can have good facilities, keep them up. And each time you've gone out with that over the years, going back to certainly the early 90s, you have indicated that there's no projected increase in the millage rate. And I think back in the 90s, and Terry, if I'm not mistaken, it was probably around 26 mils for bonds. And we're down to 16.9 mils for bonds now because you reduced it 1 mil this year, and it's going to go down more next year. So you've been able to keep pace with your capital improvement program. The voters have granted their authority to you to do major capital construction projects, keep your facilities in good shape, and each time you went out to the voters with a representation, no projected increase in the millage rate, but you went well beyond that, and you reduced the millage rate substantially while still providing for millions and millions and millions of construction so you have first-class facilities. You've been able to do that in part because of your good bond rating. You've been able to do it because you've been very aggressive in refinancing at lower interest rates as many of your bond issues as you can whenever the opportunity presented itself. And all that translates to being able to reduce the millage burden to the taxpayers and still provide the capital facilities that you need. Because if you don't do it, you're right, no one else is going to do it for you.
Right. And I guess I was looking for that crystal ball to say how big a window we got with the interest rates that we're currently getting to. You know, of course, it doesn't take but just one thing to happen, and all of a sudden the interest rates may skyrocket. But, you know, the stability of the market and everything else that we have.
Well, there's
right
there's two aspects to it. You have, you know, your refinancings, and that's a function not only of the lower interest rates, but also when the bonds are first callable, when you can first redeem them. So what we've been doing for more than the last decade is refinancing when you get closer to the optional redemption date on those bonds, and it becomes economical at lower interest rates to refinance those. And your new money bonds, you sell those in whatever the market rate is at that time, but given your AA rating, you're going to get the lowest rate at that particular point in time.
Right. And the other thing is when we do all of our construction projects, it helps St. Tammany residents with jobs and income and everything else, so that it helps build the economy locally. So it's a good win for everybody. But I was just wanting to see how good you were with your crystal ball to know how far out there something may change. Thanks, Grant.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Any other questions for Mr. Schluter or Ms. Ferrier?
Thank y'all.
Grant, Mr. Schluter, I'm just curious, we were talking about the state legislature a while ago. What's the state's credit rating right now? Do you know off the top of your head?
What are they down to? They were AA, and they've been downgraded AA minus.
Oh, so our rating is better than the legislature's. Very good. Interesting. All right. Any questions from the public for Mr. All right. Regarding the resolution, that is. Thank you, Mr. Schluter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed by like sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you again. All right. Item B, Ms. Prevost.
To consider and take action with respect to adopting a resolution authorizing the incurring of debt and issuance of $25 million of general obligation school bonds, Series 2017, of St. Tammany Parish-wide School District Number 12 of the Parish of St. Tammany, State of Louisiana, and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
All right,
Mr. Sluter.
Okay, the resolution's on the table. Mrs. Seeley moves. Is there a second? All right, Mrs. Drucker seconds. All right, floor is open now for discussion. We'll go to Mr. Sluter. You want to take that?
Just quickly, this is $25 million. It's the last series of bonds approved by the voters at the 2013 election. So this is just proceeding with this. We anticipate going through the process to sell and issue these bonds. And we anticipate delivery and funds in the bank for construction projects September 28th.
Okay. Ms. Tipton has a smile on her face up here, so you can't see it because her back's to you. Anyway, any questions for Mr. Sluter? All right, any questions from the public regarding the resolution? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by like sign. Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you again, Mr. Schluter and Ms. Farrier. Thank you. All right, monthly purchasing report. Ms. Prevost?
The monthly purchasing report is in your packets, and Mrs. Stevens is here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Stevens? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you as always, Mrs. Prevost. All right, we now turn to the president. Madam President, we have any announcements this evening?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mr. Nation. The regular board meeting will be held Thursday, July 13th at 7 p.m. That's next Thursday. And there will be a special board meeting this month, Thursday, July 20th, for expulsion appeal hearings. So please mark your calendars, and if you know you're going to be out of town for that, if you would just let Christy or Karen know, or Mr. Falls. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. With there not being any other business to come before the committee, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.